So, welcome, Holly, to the Iowa Crossroad podcast. This podcast is dedicated to looking at theological implications to the political realm and kind of where those two intersect. So, glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some important legislation and what's happening in Iowa and what I plan to do if I get in there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I got to say, I was really excited when I saw that you threw your hat in the ring. I know we went to church for a short time together. Shoot, that was probably 7 years ago, something to that effect.
It's been some time.
Um, it's been a little while, uh, but I was thrilled because I think that when when we have multiple candidates, that just shows that there's a really strong primary in the area. So, I really think that here in Warren County and parts of Marion, but basically Senate District 11, I think that it's really shaping up to be a very good primary, and I think that you bring a lot of value, especially from, and we'll get into it a little bit later on, but especially from that local level leadership. I think that, in my estimation, that's something that's missing a lot. Many times they go from no politics right into the Senate or the House, which isn't a problem. It can be good, but at the same time, it's always nice to have that public and local leadership. So start by telling the folks here who may not know who you are a little bit about yourself, your local leadership position. Um, yeah, just give us a
Sure.
little bit of a rundown of who you are.
Sure. Yep. Well, my name is Hollie Zajicek. So a lot of people have a hard time pronouncing the last name when they see how it's spelled. It's kind of spelled crazy. But I'll blame that on my husband and their Czech background. But I am a Christian and a constitutional conservative, and as you know, candidate for state senate for District 11 here. I currently work as the economic development director for the city of Norwalk. I've been here for about 9 years, a little over 9 years in this role. And before that, I was the executive director for Warren County Economic Development. And prior to that, I worked at USDA Rural Development I was a loan specialist. And before that, I was a business owner for 10 years. So a lot of experience in business development and local government.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely quite the career. And you saying that you're in Norwalk right now. So tell us a little bit about what that position does, and maybe how that position would set you up, and the positions you've had would set you up for that positive Senate
Sure.
seat.
Yes. I've loved working as the economic development director in Norwalk. It's just been so fulfilling. The business community, the investors, the developers, the lenders, everybody that's involved in making projects come to life in all of the city. The entire city of Norwalk is involved on some level from the government end of it, to making these bigger projects happen. So it's really been fun and interesting and fulfilling to be a part of the projects and part of the growth, because over time, we've added, I want to say in 9 years, 420% increase in our
Oh,
commercial and
wow.
valuation. So that's massive when it comes
Yeah.
to what that looks like for tax value, tax benefits that go towards the schools, our community. We can use those property taxes towards everything that people need, from water, streets, parks, library, you name it. So that's really important to have that commercial and industrial growth, so the residential property owners do not have to take on those extra costs of public services. So that's been really fun. Plus, the community really wanted to have goods and services right here in the community and not have to travel into other, metro communities for those. Norwalk started out as a really heavy residential, kind of a suburb of the metro, like many other suburbs that are now growing into their own cities, and they have all of the goods and services and places to go and things to do, medical facilities. So Norwalk really needed that, and now we're there. We have all of those opportunities and better jobs. A lot of great new jobs. We've had, I think, over 1,000 new jobs added to the market in the last 10 years.
Wow,
So
that's
that's been
incredible.
it's been wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that definitely is important to keep the young people here. I know one of the issues that Iowa's facing is a lot of the young people. they go to college and they take off and they don't come back to Iowa. And so we're losing that talent. And that's remarkable that Norwalk is one of the places that can retain that talent and really draw new talent to the area as well. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Great point that you make, because that's something that I plan to really focus pretty heavily on if I'm elected, is that retention. We can't have this brain drain. Iowa has just such a great quality of life. We raise
Oh
great
yeah.
kids and great young people, and they're smart and they have good schools and they're trained well and they're hard workers. And then, yeah, they leave because we don't have enough opportunity or enough career opportunity. And they leave and maybe they don't come back. Some come back, but we want to have enough reason for them to stay here or go out and experience the world. It's good for opens your aperture, gives you a good perspective on the world and life, and it makes you appreciate the Midwest more, Iowa more, and then they can come back. But those opportunities have to be there, and that takes a lot of hard
Oh
work.
yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, and a lot of planning and such too. It's I think a lot of people they don't understand, or maybe they don't. And when I say people, often the people in leadership don't understand that it's a strategic vision. It's not, these things don't happen overnight, and so the decisions that we make now will impact whether my kids, my oldest is 9, so the decisions that the leaders make now will impact whether or not he stays in Iowa. So it's definitely not just a overnight topic.
Right. Happen,
Yeah.
and it's not haphazard.
Yep.
Right. A lot of strategic planning.
Yeah. So so you decided to run for the state senate, and what made you want to join that race, especially in this current culture of political divide? And it seems like Iowa's been able to sidestep that a little bit, but kind of seems to be coming to Iowa now as of recently as well. So what made you want to run for office there?
Well, honestly, I never thought about political aspirations of any sort. I think the most I thought that I might get involved in someday would be when I'm retired, way down the road. Maybe I'll run for a mayor or something like that. So I never thought about that. I didn't want to be a politician. It's a dog eat dog world, and it is a sacrifice. For the good people that want to do it and make a difference, it's a great sacrifice. You have
Oh yeah.
no free time. You still have to work a full-time job unless you're independently wealthy or retired. You lose a lot of money because it's expensive to run. You get beat up. You get harassed. There's all sorts of negatives that come with it. But if no one was willing to sacrifice and step out to do the right thing, then nothing good would ever happen, and no good
Yeah.
people would ever be in charge of anything. So I had not thought about it until some people came to me and they said, you know what? It's really important that A, Republicans hold on to this seat, that it doesn't get flipped, and then B, that this area, specifically the Norwalk area, have a direct voice in the legislature. It's a wildly growing, rapidly growing area, one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Iowa, and we need to have a direct voice there, and somebody that has experience, hands-on experience with business, economic development, growth, local government, and not afraid to just speak their mind, because I don't have aspirations to be a politician. So I feel like I have a little more freedom to just kind of do what needs to be done instead of,
Yeah.
just going with the flow to keep your position. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the next steps for your campaign?
well, right now it's kind of a mad rush to June 2nd. Because I came into the race a little bit later than the other two candidates, because Senator Julian Garrett decided not to run for reelection, and I was not ever in any mindset of running against him or putting my hat in the ring until, like I said, some people came to me and said, "Hey, we really need to do this," and Senator Garrett has chosen not to run for reelection. So then it was like go time. And within a 4-day period, I had to get all of the signatures, get all the information and documents done and into the Secretary of State by this deadline. So I've only been in this now, I think maybe 3 weeks. So it's been pretty wild. But the
Yep.
next steps are a lot of campaigning, doing the door knocking, getting in front of as many people as I can in the district, and fundraising. And nobody likes to fundraise. Nobody likes to bother somebody at their door and interrupt their private space at home, but those are things that have to happen in a campaign. So that's the next, month and a half, that it will be a lot of face-to-face interaction with as many people as I can speak to. I need to hear what their thoughts are, and relate to them what my priorities would be, and hope that people get out to vote. It's very, very important that people vote on June 2nd in that primary.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. I think that, yeah, Iowa's in a very unique spot, especially with the governor race as well. Being an open seat, I think since the first time in 2006 or something, when Governor Branstad came back in. So it's definitely a unique time, and I think, yeah, for all the listeners out there, go vote. It's crucial that we retain both the governor's race and for those in Senate District 11, like myself, this seat as well.
Yes.
Um, so, so I reached out to a few friends here in the district, and whenever I told them that had the privilege of interviewing you, I said, "Hey, what are some questions that you've got that would swing a vote one way or the other for your campaign?" And one of those issues, I think, is a very interesting issue. Um, it's of course near and dear to many people's hearts, and that's cancer. Um,
Mm.
I mean, I don't think that there's somebody in Iowa that hasn't been touched or impacted in some capacity by a loved one, or maybe they themselves have cancer or have had cancer. So one of the biggest issues facing Iowa right now is that rising cancer rate. Uh, I can't remember when it was now. It was a few weeks ago, I believe. Um, there was a cancer report that said that this year alone in 2026, 21,700 Iowans are expected to be diagnosed with cancer. We're leading the nation in cancer rates among people 20 to 39. We're near the top nationally with rates still going up while most states are going down. Um, I'll be totally frank about it on this side. At the same time as that's happening, we've seen policies like Senate File 394, which would give immunity to pesticide companies, that got passed in the Senate last year and then got killed in the House. But then it's also alongside efforts to increase taxes on tobacco products. So in my brain, and maybe in the brain of others, there's kind of it's hard to make sense of that policy direction to say, hey, we need to raise taxes on tobacco products because that causes cancer, all while removing legal protections from people who have gotten cancer from those pesticides and nitrates in the water and all that stuff. So, how would you address it? What's your thoughts on that? And what would you like to see done in the Senate to address the Iowa's rising cancer rates?
Yes, it's horrific. And this isn't something that can be a partisan issue, and it is not something that can be taken slowly. It has to be a train out of the station as fast as they can possibly find the exact causes, the exact um, chemicals, everything that can be done as fast as it can be done to stop this thing, because we can't afford to just lose people right and left
Oh
like
yeah.
this. Right? It's horrible. We already have a low or declining population in Iowa, so we really cannot afford that. Plus, it's horrible. Nobody deserves to get
No.
cancer, and especially just because they're just living and they're drinking their water and they're breathing the air. So this is a major issue, and there shouldn't be immunity for anyone for anything in situations like that. Period. I don't understand that split legislation either. I get, yes, we should definitely tax all of these, items and products that are horrible for you to begin with. But on the chemical side and the agricultural industry, I understand why that's happening. I don't think that it's right, but I understand why there's sort of that split, because our agricultural industry in Iowa is so important, right? It's so critical to us. It's a huge part of our economy, our exports, everything that makes Iowa what it is started there, and it's still a huge piece of who we are and what we do as a state. So there is a lot of power there. There is a lot of influence, and some of that rightfully so. But when it comes to things like this, that's where that buck's got to stop. And so it's something that can be handled, but it's going to be a little bit painful for a while when it comes to how do we do this? How do we mandate these chemicals out of the systems or out of production? I don't know how that's going to be handled at this point. I'm not an expert in those areas, but it absolutely has to be hands down top priority for people. And so the transparency, the research, the bipartisan types of efforts, people are going to have to come together on it. And I'll do anything that I can to be a part of that, because I too, like most people, have had cancer in the family, and a lot of cancer in the family, and almost lost people or have lost people. And it's just got to stop.
Yes, yeah, and you had mentioned something, in your answer there that I think is important for people to really grasp onto, and that is there's gonna be some pain,
Mhm.
as we fix things. Sometimes we make the right decisions, sometimes we make the wrong decisions, when we're addressing a very important topic like this. I mean, I wish happy path, I wish that we could just make the right decisions and eradicate cancer, support, the agriculture space and such, and everything's just fine. But at the same time, I think that I think to understand that there will be that pain is an important concept to take to the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of course, feeding the world and providing um, everything that Iowa provides to the world through our agricultural industry is wildly important. But
Yes,
staying alive, healthy, it's got to be first, and that's just
yes, yes.
number one.
Yep, yep. And honestly, if there's a situation that farmers are feeding the world, but then we continue to bleed people, maybe because of the cancer rates, is at least a contributing factor, I would imagine.
Mhm.
Um, and we continue to lose people to other states. Uh, that means our farmers are going to become more of an aged population, and
Mhm.
I mean, it's already hard enough for young people to get into farming, let alone if we just continue to lose that young talent to issues like these. So thank you for that answer. I really appreciate that.
You bet.
Another one that is, of course, near and dear to my heart. I did a few podcast episodes on this past year, and it's the pro-life uh, bills in the state of Iowa.
Mm.
Frankly, I feel a little let down by Iowa Republican leadership in this space. So I know that this isn't Senate stuff. This was in the House, but in the Iowa House, there were two bills filed this year to recognize life at conception. One bill was House File 2316, and the other was 2332. The difference between these two bills that both viewed life at conception, life at starting at conception, uh, 2316 would have put restrictions on IVF and would have given equal protections for the murder of the unborn by opening the door for prosecution for the mother who would abort her child in the state. And then House File 2332, also life at conception bill, but would not have put those limitations on IVF or prosecuted the mother in any capacity. Um, Representative Holt did not even allow House File 2316 to be put into subcommittee. And then the 2332, Representative Dunwell scheduled the subcommittee and then immediately, I shouldn't say immediately, last minute canceled that. So, in effect, Iowa, who could lose the Iowa's governor's race, the governor's mansion, this year, and with no telling when we might get that back this year, pretty much an overwhelming supermajority of Iowa Republicans refused to act at for life at conception. So, what
Mm.
are your views on life at conception, and would you be supportive of those equal protections for the unborn?
Yes, so this is definitely an interesting topic and situation that's been happening with those proposed, amendments or pieces of legislation. And I'm not sure why it got stopped in subcommittee, or where that changeover happened. And just being completely transparent with you, I really like to know all of the details about a piece of legislation or proposed bill before I give a really kind of educated
Yep,
response. I want to make sure I know it.
understandable.
And I did listen to your podcast, and you had some really great points. I think I learned more just listening to you than I have trying to read through these bills at this point. But I'm still in that kind of mode because I really want to understand it all before giving an educated response. I hope that doesn't make it seem like I'm waffling, because I'm not, because I 100% believe all life absolutely value. God made that so clear in the Bible in so many places that he knew us before we even were a thought in the womb. And so it is incredibly important that that life at conception is protected. It's protected all the way through. And, I guess maybe where some of the legislators are coming from with the prosecution of the mothers is, as a Christian, obviously babies, all life has to be protected. You cannot kill these innocent lives, for any reason. But on the prosecution side of the mother, that's probably where some of them are struggling a little bit, because biblically, when we're looking at our biblical principles, and we think of Jesus and his forgiveness, and these various situations with pressure or young mothers, I can see where some of those people might waffle a little bit on that, and it's, I guess, somewhat understandable. But it's also understandable that you just can't have exceptions to killing a baby. I mean, it's horrific. So that's about the most that I can say about it at this point, just because I haven't had the chance to
Yep.
really dig those. But 100% absolutely protect those babies at all cost. And as I know more, I'm happy to get back with you on a little bit stronger stance on those particular bills and what they're trying to do with
Yeah.
them.
So one of the reasons that Representative Dunwell gave to not or to cancel House File 2332, which would have been life at conception, no prosecution of the mother, and no limitations in IVF. So it should be something I would think that every Republican could get behind.
Mm-hmm.
2316, I support that bill. However, I can see how other Republicans might not. Come to terms with the strength of that bill.
Mm-hmm.
However, 2332, I think that we should all be unanimously in agreement on that. One of the interesting things that Representative Dunwell said in one of his Facebook press releases was that he didn't feel that they had essentially enough support in the Iowa House to pass that bill. So my thought is, and I want to ask you what your take on it would be, but my thought would be is some things are worth fighting for, even if it's a losing battle.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Senate side, would you seek to introduce those life at conception bills if elected, even if potentially there's not enough Republican support to get that bill across the finish line? Is that something that you'd be willing to fight for?
I would definitely be willing to fight for it. I think just looking at that fine balance of, would that mean something worse later? That's where you'd really have to kind of take a look. Like, are we going to have a chance at this again if it dies? Or, just kind of weighing out all of those repercussions
Yeah.
either way. But
Yeah.
but yes, I would definitely fight for doing the right thing, no matter what we think that outcome's going to be. Because if you don't start out a fight for it, it's never going to get there.
Yeah.
But taking a look at that long term uh, chance of potentially losing out at all of
Yeah.
something that's better, that's stronger, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to be respectful of your time. I see that's creeping up on 5:10. So I'll breeze through this next one and then get to property taxes, which I think is where some of your local expertise might speak into that void. Um, Eminent domain. Last year, 12 senators withheld their vote on the budget until a vote was made on banning eminent domain. When they forced the vote, it passed the Senate, and then Governor Reynolds vetoed that bill. This year, sadly, the Republican leadership in the Senate punished many of those by essentially removing them from key Senate committee roles. So this is something that's deeply bipartisan among Iowans. I, it's shocking to me how that it's not been actioned on this year at all.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your views on the private property and the use of eminent domain, both specifically for this pipeline project and then also just in general?
Yeah, well, constitutionally, your property is your property, and nobody should be able to forcibly take it from you really for any reason. I know that law does protect certain things when it comes to, public infrastructure and different parts, but it is your property and it shouldn't be taken away from you, and especially not for something like a carbon pipeline. I think that researching and exploring different types of energy and resources for our future is valuable. We need to do it, but not at the expense of somebody's property or their personal rights or their personal liberties. So with the carbon pipeline specifically, and again, I'm trying to learn as much as I can, as fast as I can about these different things, but so far I'm not seeing what that long-term benefit is in it, in terms of, can this thing sustain itself and pay for itself without government funding or taxpayer funding or taking people's properties. Where's the proof behind this, that this thing is going to be a good option and a long-term sustainable option financially? So I don't see that yet. I'll continue researching into it and listening, but absolutely not at the expense of somebody's personal rights. No way.
Yeah, yeah, good. Um, yeah, I don't it just shocks me how that's something that, we couldn't get across the finish line this year, especially, I know that I'd mentioned Representative Holt earlier, but, I mean, he went all throughout the state this past year doing town halls and all that stuff and drumming up support for banning eminent domain, and really, it's not the Iowa House that can't get this thing across the finish line, it's the Senate that I don't know what's going on in the Senate, but uh, the Senate just can't seem to get this thing across the finish line. So, anyway, it's good to hear that. Um, the final thing that I like to talk about would be property taxes. So, this is another thing that I think Iowans feel a little slighted by both the Iowa House and the Senate for their inability to bring a resolution to the issue of property taxes. However, and I know there's tons of nuance in this, but property taxes are set at that local level. But the local level many times feels that they need to raise the taxes to cover what they consider necessary spending. So I'd like to get your insight on not necessarily how you go about fixing the property tax, because frankly, that seems to be a local issue. However, what's your views on the property tax issues here in the state of Iowa? And then how do you potentially keep those localities accountable to, you know, not have them overspend on what they might consider necessary spending, but that ultimately might not be?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a majorly important popular topic right now that we've been dealing with, not only at my job but just in my community and the industries that I work with. It's a huge topic right now because yes, everybody wants property tax relief, and we should have it. I mean, if you look at all the different ways that we are taxed to death, it's insane, from federal all the way on down, and especially businesses. I mean, literally, our dear God in heaven help us if you're a business owner, because it is not easy. So with that, I definitely believe that this reform is important, and doing it the right way is more important, because what'll end up happening if it's done incorrectly, and that's probably why nothing's come out of legislature solid enough to make a difference yet on tax bills, and it's because there's so many ways to mess it up, and if it's messed up, it's going to cost people more money in the long run. So with that, on the local government level, what we learned is, cities provide the services, but we only receive a portion of somebody's property taxes. So we have our city levy, but then there's the school, there's the county. We don't control their levies. A portion of the taxes go to community colleges and some other entities. And so the city has a portion of the property taxes to provide all of the services then to the property that's paying that entire property tax bill. So the issue is, locally, residents have the right now to go to their cities or their counties or whoever their taxing body is where they live, and they have the right to go in and say, you know what, we don't think you should be spending this much money on these four services. They're not that important to us. We want our property taxes lowered. So then the city body or the county government would get together and run the formulas and determine, okay, if we cut this particular service out or this amenity or you name it, let's look at that across the board and what that's going to change in a average residential property owner's monthly tax bill. And then we've run those formulas every which way you can possibly imagine. And the hard point of this is that the two biggest taxing bodies are public safety and schools. And no one wants to cut those. They're never going to want to cut those, and they shouldn't, right? We want our good schools, and we want to be safe. And we need our emergency services. But those are the only two areas that could effectively physically, visually change somebody's property taxes enough on their bill that they would feel that relief. So if the state or federal or any other, entities come in and say, okay, local bodies, you need to start cutting your spending because people want to see lower property taxes. That's what they tell us when we knock on their doors. Then the state needs to determine how they're going to help with that, because our voters can come in and say, cut these 5 things out. We want our property taxes lower, but they have to understand they're not going to have those services or amenities anymore. And that's okay. That's their right. Now we have a proposed project. The library plans to build a new library. They need more space. They need, we're growing. They have a ton of people that use their services. And of course, a new building is very expensive. So either we would have to go out to vote and ask the taxpayers, if you want this, because you obviously do, you use these services, you come in all the time. If you want these services, this is what it will cost on your tax bill, or enough private funding or fundraising would have to be done to pay for the facility. But then you have the ongoing operational costs. So again, it's a local choice with these taxpayers and the residents. Same thing with the schools. If they want to build a new school, you go out for bond, you ask your taxpayers, are you willing to do this? Here's what it'll cost. And then those local people have the right to determine what those services and taxes ultimately are. So where that disconnect comes in is when the state legislators are out campaigning, or they're, they hear this over and over. We want lower taxes, lower taxes. So they feel like they have to do something about it, but they don't fully understand what that means at the local level. And when you start to reach into this local control thing, to me, that's very anti-Republican. That's very
Yeah.
like anti-American, right? It's against everything that we were established on as a country, to have that local decision-making power and limited overreach from state and federal governments. So with that, I think that taxes can be lowered in a variety of different ways. The state started out with a really good kind of energy by lowering our income taxes, the flat rate. So that was great. That was wonderful. Federal needs to do that. But there's probably ways that the state can look at their own budget first, start cutting things out of the state budget that can help with that property tax relief and still allow cities to provide the services that people expect. Can all local governments cut some things here and there? Sure, you can slim it up a bit, but it's not going to be enough to really notice it on your tax bill, because the city, I'm just speaking city example, but county, whoever, whatever local government, again, you would have to cut so much out of people's services to physically see a change in their bill. And that's where that issue is. And so I don't know how it's going to get out of the legislation with a really good a really good end result on this, because unless communities choose which things they don't want, they're just not going to see a significant enough change. Other than with development, when you have industrial and commercial growth, that does level the playing field. So that helps bring down that service cost to residential properties. For example, like the city of Norwalk, over the last 6 years, we have lowered our specific levy, the one that we can control. We've lowered it every year for 6 years because of the
Wow.
growth out in the community.
Yeah.
Does that show much on the bill? Probably not, because values have gone up, but we don't determine values. The county does. And the school actually has lowered their levy every year for, I want to say, maybe going on 10 years. And this current year, they're lowering it by another dollar. So they're also doing their part because of this commercial industrial growth that we've had in the area. And one of them was a data center, the Microsoft over
Yep.
on 35, huge player, huge benefit to the school. So they're able to lower that levy. And the school is going out for, they have a bond referendum right now for 65 million to build a new elementary and do some other improvements. And that's keeping tax neutral. So they're able to do that without raising people's taxes. So that is a way that people can level out or lower taxes, is through just good growth. So there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of nuances, but the legislation needs to hear from people that are directly in the line of figuring out how these things work, and not just trying to determine it from a state level. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier too, if it's really anti-Republican to step on the toes of the localities. And I
Mhm.
think that's a crucial point in this whole debate to remember is, you know, we have those levels of government for a reason, and for the state to come in and step on a county or what have you, um, yeah, I mean, I think you put it perfectly. It's very anti-Republican. So there's definitely a balance of trying to figure out how do we fix this issue with how do we not really undermine our position for generations to come with how we view the way government should work. So I think,
Mhm.
yeah, striking that balance is a very difficult one because really, whichever side of the pendulum somebody lands on, they're gonna frustrate somebody. You know, it's
Yeah,
yeah,
there are some decent proposals, of how to kind of fill some of those gaps. So if you do want to lower, right now residential properties are taxed at about 45, somewhere in there, 45% of their value. Commercial industrial properties are taxed at about 90% of their value. So they have a much higher difference there in what they pay. But, there are ways, they're talking about different, gas taxes and, various, sales tax, different things that you can do that's more, it's not just a hard bill that's directly coming out of your pay every single month. It's more of a choice or based on uh, individual experience. If you go and you buy something, then you're going to pay an extra
yeah,
tax, or if you traveling through the state. So there's different ways to do it. Other states are starting to kind of figure things out. Florida, obviously a little bit different situation because they have tourism, but they're able to backfill some of those public service taxes through tolls and just various ways. So there's other ways to fill some of those gaps. And I do believe, if you own a property or if you're a senior and you own your property, that definitely needs to be looked at differently. At some point, you shouldn't owe, you should totally outright own your property and not owe somebody
yeah.
for the rest of your life on it. So yeah, that's something to be considered for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Holly, thank you so much for sitting down and doing this interview. Where can people learn more about you if they want to get involved? How can they get involved with your campaign?
Yeah, so the website's probably the quickest and the easiest, and it's just Zajicek for iowasenate.com. The information is on there. There's a contact form on there if you'd like to get together, have a meeting or a presentation. There's also information there to join the campaign if you want to help, whether that's just getting the word out, getting a yard sign, donating to the campaign. That's probably the best place to go first. We do have social media as well, but we will have an event coming up on May 7th at 4:30 in the evening in Cumming in the Middlebrook development there for the campaign specifically as a fundraiser to just try to get across that at least that primary finish line and hold tight to this Republican seat.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Max. I appreciate it. And let me know if you need anything else in the future.
All right, sounds good. Have a good night.